Hey everyone, welcome to another typology interview. Just so you know, I think there's a what's it called, a clubhouse going on now. So tune into that. Watch this afterwards. Don't take away from the clubhouse. It's a live event. You can always watch this after. But Michelle is great. If you want to stick around, you can learn from Michelle, and we'll get started. So how's it going? Welcome.
Yeah. Oh, was that,
Welcome.
sorry, was that to me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
to the other people
Sorry.
on the interview too, they can answer.
Okay. Sorry.
It's all good. How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a nice weekend, and yeah, like I told you before, this was kind of like my break weekend, so it was nice that this was able to work out. I've been thinking about potentially doing this at some point, and glad we got it to work.
Yeah, you're learning to be a medical doctor at the moment, right?
Yes, I'm currently a third year med student. Mm-hmm.
Cool. And okay, so let's get started with what are you doing here? How did you get here? What's your history?
Into typology.
Yeah.
So I first got into MBTI when I was in middle of college. It was just, I took the test and I got results and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And yeah, I guess that's true. And I dabbled into it here and there and found it kind of like, just a fun, silly hobby, I guess, that I kind of just did on the side. And I had a friend who was also really into it actually too. She actually was more into it than I was at the time. And that's kind of what I guess drew me into having it become like a personal hobby too. But then like eventually the more I learned about it, and the more I got into like, learning about the cognitive functions and everything, the more I became like intrigued by this really organized system of, categorizing people's personalities. I ended up seeing it kind of like how, like as I'm studying, medicine, we categorize diseases that people have into, based on certain symptoms that they have and whatnot. I kind of see it as like a diagnosis for personality, like these different diagnostic types, I guess you can call them, for personality. It's like I can diagnose both like the physical illness that someone has, and I can diagnose the personality type that someone has and potential type related weaknesses or drawbacks and pros and cons about that, I guess. And then so as I got more invested into learning about stuff like that, I kind of just stumbled across Dave's videos. Like back when he was Dave Superpowers, I just, came across his videos on YouTube, and I got really, even more intrigued by, just the organization of how structured he was at defining the functions and the types. And yeah, actually, because early on when I was learning about the functions, I remember being very like confused with what was the best way to really narrow down what each of these functions mean. Everybody in the community seemed to have their own, I guess, interpretation of the functions. Like, yeah, I guess they might have been getting at the same thing, but how they were presenting their understanding of the functions, it was kind of all over the place. So and that was that was part of what drove me to learn more about this. It was just something that I felt very drawn to, like nail down my understanding of what the functions mean and filter out all the junk that a bunch of people in the community seem to be tossing back and forth. And then so when I came across Dave's videos, it seemed to really clarify like what do these functions mean, and then not only what do they mean, but how can we apply it to type. And eventually I even just stumbled across the Facebook group, like it was a recommended group at the time, and I was like, hey, why not? I've been watching the videos, and so I joined. And initially it was just kind of I was dabbling back and forth. I was still in MBTI mode, trying to understand functions from the MBTI, the mixed broad, I guess, MBTI perspective. And it took a while before I could, I guess, properly separate approaching type from the traditional MBTI standpoint versus the OP standpoint, because while they have similar things, there's obviously some differences in how they approach not just the functions, but how to understand it, how to type someone. Yeah. So, but eventually the more I learned about it, the more invested I got with, the OP side of things. And eventually I caved in and decided to get, officially typed. And now it's been about a year, a little bit over a year since I was officially typed in. And yeah, since then it's actually been really like interesting and useful. Seeing myself in the context of the OP type that they gave me, seeing my weaknesses and strengths through that, and learning how to work around those and improve on that in that way. It's been really helpful.
Yeah, really awesome. So we got a couple of questions. There's a big echo coming back though from your side. I don't know.
Oh, I can't really hear.
Okay. So first question is, Sadet, when will you be a mod here? I'll tell you what, right now there's only really one person I need to moderate, and that's you. So if you can moderate yourself, that would be awesome. And we'll practice there. If you're good at that, I might add you to be a better mod. But Xiao actually has a serious question. When you wrote MBTI type as INTJ instead of, like, why? Why did you write that?
Yeah, so this is why I like to emphasize how MBTI and OP, while they have like, similar origins and they draw from similar sources, like, the Jungian functions, there's still some differences in how they approach, typing someone. Like, for example, OP separates types into observers and deciders. Are you, control, chaos, organize, gather versus self-tribe? MBTI doesn't really separate types based on that, I guess. I mean, there's, I guess, a vague, the IPs, EJs versus the IJs, EPs. They still have, similar differences and stuff. But at the end of the day, when you're typing, when you're trying to figure out someone's functions using the OP versus MBTI perspective, it's still going to give you, it can still give you like, different results because the process is a bit different. Like, yeah, like I said, MBTI doesn't really differentiate between self-tribe versus control chaos.
So
and that's why I feel like
an I in both systems, and then in MBTI you identify with TE second.
Yeah, because I feel like in MBTI they're not really measuring like TE and MBTI is basically it's the function that drives you to be effective. Like it makes you do what works, like seek out what works, what's efficient. TI is
more than TI.
TI is more about the why, the how to make it efficient. I guess how to make things work. TE is more about how can we make it useful? Like what's the use of it? And then TI is just basically asking why, like the logical basis, I guess, if that makes sense.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about your thinking function, whether it's TI or TE? How do you see yourself like in reality actually thinking?
So when I'm thinking in reality, what I'm doing, like I'm always trying to, every time I'm trying to, I guess it's kind of tied into my NI. Like when I'm planning for the future, when I'm planning certain things out, I'm always looking at, okay, what's the useful practicality of this? What's going to be useful for people in the future? How's the thing that I'm going to do right now going to have, a useful outcome? So I'm focused, I guess, on the effectiveness. I'm driven by the effective outcome. Sorry?
The utility you're talking about.
Yes, yeah. I'm driven by the utility, the usefulness of something. But then I guess how I pursue that effectiveness, how I make something be useful, I guess I take a very TI approach because then I tend to over focus on, okay, how can I get it effective? How can I, like, what's the why? What are my reasons for wanting to pursue this useful thing? What do I understand about this and so forth? And I can get so entrenched in like figuring out the why and the how part that I guess I can sometimes, sacrifice the effectiveness part. But at the end of the day, it's the effectiveness that's driving me. It's kind of like how, MBTI is kind of like the input and OP is kind of like, kind of like the output, how you, like MBTI kind of tells you like, what cognitive preferences do you prefer in general, whereas MBTI is like, OP is like what human needs drive those cognitive preferences and influence how you pursue the things that the MBTI functions get.
It sounds like you're trying to preserve MBTI as if there's something there to save. So you do see that there's something in MBTI that needs saving? There's something that maybe OP is throwing out the window?
Not really. I mean, it's more like, I guess it kind of goes back to how it's based on how I guess I understand personality and what we should look for when we're defining someone's personality. Like I believe personality is based on what core things drive you when you're at your best, when you're content and, you know, functioning the way you were meant to function in your healthiest state. It's kind of like, you know, when you're analyzing the body, you're not going to use a standard like based on like, you know, a sick body. You want to look at, you know, the body in its healthiest state, and then you'll know how it functions. So it's kind of similar with like personality. When you're functioning at your healthiest state, when you're psychologically, mentally healthy, like what are the core things that drive you? What core desires drive you when you're at your healthiest? Because obviously when you're at your unhealthy state and you're deprived of something, you're obviously going to your core desire is going to be focused on what you're deprived of. But when you don't have those deprivations, when you're at your healthiest, there's still going to be something that's driving you. So what's that thing that's driving you? I feel like, and this is why I like to look at MBTI as like a way to understand, like, you know, what desires are instilled by, like, based on the cognitive functions that we have. So like, for example, SI, that kind of, like, okay, definitions aside, it's all kind of wishy-washy, I guess, in the MBTI community about what's the perfect definition for the functions. So I've kind of learned to not really, at least from the MBTI standpoint.
There's also like a differentiation, right, between the MBTI as a corporation and a company, and they're putting out their own material. They have their own definitions. There's practitioners, and then between what you're talking about, the community. So what's that? Do you see a differentiation there in the definitions as well?
Like between what the community presents versus the actual like organization?
Right.
I mean, I mainly, I guess I haven't really kind of like differentiate, like basically the definitions that I go off of are from some YouTubers that I know have been, you know, researching the actual organization of the MBTI. There are some like, you know, YouTubers out there who actually base their videos and their teachings based on, you know, certain books that, you know, Isabel Briggs and Myers actually, like, you know, wrote. And so that's kind of where I draw the definitions from. I don't really take the community's definitions, I guess, and use
and
that.
where does Young fit into all this?
Young, I guess, would just be the, you know, the basis from which, I guess, yeah, Myers and Briggs drew it off of, and then the YouTubers that, you know, utilize his book and Myers Briggs, yeah, are also related to that. But yeah, anyway, back to what I was saying about the desires part. Like, so yeah, given that it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of hard to get like the perfect definition for each of the functions when you're using an MBTI standpoint, because there's just, like, you know, so much you can say about each of them through the MBTI standpoint. I've kind of learned to like look at, okay, what are the desires that each function instills in us? If you have, like, you know, SI at the top, you can go into detail about, you know, how to define SI, but basically what it's getting at is, you know, SI kind of instills the desire for, like, say, structure and stability. And so if you're having SI at the top, that's going to be like your core desire for stability. If you have something like FE at the top, the core desire of FE is basically camaraderie. So you're most motivated, you're at your best when you're, you know, pursuing the desire for camaraderie and, you know, fellowship with one another. So it's like, yeah, what are the core desires that each of the functions instill? And that's like your core type. And then OP is more like, how do you pursue those core desires based on the human needs that influence how you use the cognitive functions? It's like, you know, it's like
why can't the core desires fit into OP? Like, why is there a need to differentiate? Why do you want to keep MBTI separate?
I think because the core desires that I outlined through MBTI are more like, I don't want to say like specific, but I guess, yeah, maybe because with like OP, it's more like general, like your core desire of, you know, NI or SI, like savior types. It's like organization is kind of like the core thing that drives it. And I don't know, I guess from the OP standpoint, it's not so much about like desire, like needs versus desires. Like, I guess that's kind of where I differentiate it. Like the human needs of organize, gather, self-tribe, those are more like needs that you're, I guess, driven to, like, you're obligated to fulfill, whereas desires are more things that I guess you're motivated to fulfill, like when you have your needs met, I guess, if that makes sense.
So,
So it's like,
so you define yourself as NI in terms of needs, and then you
mhm.
define yourself as NI in terms of desires.
So
So what's
basically
the
it's
difference there?
so basically it's like when I'm fulfilling my needs, I take a, and the NI approach, like I strategize based on the NI strategy. And then when I'm pursuing my desires, even when I have my needs fulfilled or my needs met, or at least when I have uh, less of a focus on pursuing my needs and I just want to do what I want, I guess. I'm most naturally motivated to still pursue like, the NI desire for, conclusive ideas and so forth. Um, and yeah, I feel like that can also give more like flexibility in terms of how people like define their type, because um, it's like if we can think of like each of the 16 types of MBTI and each of them having a subtype that's, defined by OP, that basically makes like, I don't know, 16 times 512 types. It's like if we haven't thought OP expanded the spectrum of like types, well, if we think of OP as like all the 512 types as different, categories of like
Yeah.
subcategories for each of the MBTI types, that's like, I don't know, it kind of broadens the spectrum to, include all the
So
different.
what you're actually suggesting at the core of this is you can have one cognitive function driving your OP type, what you call your need, and then you have another cognitive function that's from a different system. Both of them are in your cognition at the same time, driving your desires. So you've got two
Yeah,
cognitive functions working together, is what you're trying to say? And so you have
it's
two NIs?
no, kind of, it's kind of like, how do I like phrase this? If you can think of like, a blueprint for each of the cognitive functions, kind of like how DNA, codes for different genes that make up the body. If we can think of like, the personality blueprint and each of them having codes for each of the functions. So you still have all 8 like functions there, or 4 or 8, however you want to, whatever your perspective is on that. But yeah, each of the functions being coded by the blueprint. So they're all there. It's just, and we take like one function that's going to operate in a certain way to fulfill human needs when you're in the mode of fulfilling your needs, and then but then when you're in the mode to just kind of fulfill what you desire, fulfill what you're motivated for, aside from human needs, then they'll operate in another way, if that makes sense. It's like
what you're trying to say is that there's 2 modes. One mode is OP mode, and then when you've satisfied your OP mode, then you go to your MBTI mode when you're
kind
healthy.
of Kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, you can kind of be doing both at the same time. It's not that, oh, you have to fulfill your OP mode before you do one, or like you have to do one mode before you do the other. It's like, I'm trying to think of like, so like if you have if you have like a certain gene coded by like DNA, or a certain protein coded by, in the genetic code that does a certain function for your body, it's like, yeah, it can fulfill that function when you're in a certain mode, but then when you shift another mode, that same protein can still like fulfill another function, if that makes sense. Sorry, I'm bad at
Yeah,
like
no, that's good.
but yeah.
So I forgot I had a follow-up question. Keep going.
It's kind of like, I guess another way to put it is like if you can think of how you operate when you're in the mode of, what, like your focus is, your like the input, like your focus is on, say, like for my case, I guess as an example, the TE focus on effectiveness. Like my goal, my desire is for effectiveness. How I get to that TE effectiveness, though, is a very TI approach, and hence why I'm more NITI and OP, because I take a more I take a more like a self above tribe approach to getting the usefulness met for the tribe, if that makes sense. And yeah, it's like it's more like just focused on usefulness in general. Like, yes, for the tribe, but also I guess I have like in how I pursue that usefulness, I guess I have a initially more self above tribe approach to make the effectiveness come into play. And I guess another like example could be like, say somebody is SE at the top for MBTI, but then they get typed like NE something for OP. then that means their core desire is like the SE desire for experience, activities. But then how they get to those, how they pursue their desires, they take a very NE approach to pursuing it. It's more like, yeah, MBTI, like, or at least how I'm using MBTI in the system. It's like MBTI helps you understand what your desires are, your core desires are, and then OP helps you understand how you get to those, how you pursue and fulfill those desires based on the human needs that drive those cognitive functions for the desires.
So what did you see that was lacking in OP that needed you to sort of splice this and add another 16 types to OP, sort of thing, like to add the MBTI? Because like TI could explain effectiveness as well, no?
Yeah, but I guess the focus on it being a self above tribe function, I guess, is something that kind of makes it a bit different from how it could be a function that's considered to be responsible for the pursuit of effectiveness, usefulness. I guess I should call it more like practicality instead of effectiveness, because yeah, TI is more about the why and the understanding based on your self perception, like what you personally understand about how to make things work, your reasons for doing something.
Sure.
And yeah, and then basically it's like different from how it's, from a TE standpoint, practical for the tribe for yeah. And I guess it's more like broad, like the TE and MBTI is a bit more like broad because it's not so much what works only for the tribe, like what works from the tribe perspective. It's just what works in general. At least that's kind of how MBTI puts it. So I feel like it's a bit more broad. It's not just what works for the tribe, just what works in general. And hence, I guess, why you get the stereotypes of TE and MBTI being more, I guess, like, not seemingly tribe above self.
So what's the need then for you to have a separate system that sits on top of OP? Why can't OP handle everything?
I mean, I think it can handle everything. Like it depends on what you're trying to get at when you're trying to type yourself. What are you trying to do with your personality type? I guess it's just, I feel like OP is definitely good for components like, how to be more balanced in terms of, controlling and being more free flowing, and how to be more balanced in terms of prioritizing self needs and other people's needs. But let's say somebody doesn't really struggle with those things. Say somebody doesn't really struggle with, balancing self versus tribe stuff, and they're fairly balanced with being organized and also free flow. They still have stuff they can work on. They still have ways they can self-improve. So then at that point, it's probably useful to understand your personality type from, like, I guess, another perspective, so that you can, work towards that purpose of using, type for self-growth. And that's why I feel like it's important to emphasize that, at least if we're going to use something like, MBTI to define the core type, it has to be based on how you are at your best when you're content, because OP is definitely, like, I'm not trying to, like, I hope this doesn't give off the perception of, I'm not trying to say, screw OP, throw it out the window, or it's less of a thing and it's only sub part of this thing that I'm creating. No, if anything, it's actually a very essential component of the bigger picture of personality. Like, if anything, it's one of the most important parts to find, like, helping you find your core type. Because for example, if you say you have like a healthy approach to your human needs in OP, and you've already either, I don't know if you can say met all your human needs. I guess in some ways you can't really fulfill your needs 100%. There's always going to be something you're going to fulfill. But let's just say you have a healthy approach and you're not distressed. You're not stressing out about a certain human need, and or you're not having an imbalance in your needs as much. Then how are you functioning? How are you operating based on that healthy state? And I feel like that's where the core type found via the MBTI, I guess, or at least the way I'm trying to use MBTI, can help you understand how to, what desires still motivate you, even when you've had your problems, I guess, balance. Like, there's still stuff you can always use to work on and improve,
Yeah. So until now, you've been putting together, like, this, for me, from my perspective, is your NITI framework that you've sort of been putting forward. So you have a website below that people can check out, and a YouTube channel if people want to learn more. So let's put aside your NITI framework, which you very much demonstrated very clearly here.
Yeah.
And just talk about not how your framework works, but how you work honestly as a person. Let's just be open about you. Yeah. So like, let's talk about your NI a little bit. Do you see yourself organizing concepts? Does that make sense at all?
If I'm understanding organizing concepts in the way, like, as in it's uh, formulating like like a conceptual understanding to explain, like, the implications and the meaning behind certain things and where it's all going to lead to. Yes, definitely. Like, I feel like um, I guess both consciously and subconsciously, when I'm trying to figure something out, like, I tend to focus on, like, what's the takeaway from this thing that I'm trying to learn about, and then once I find out that takeaway, okay, where is it going to lead to? What can I do with it for this future goal, this plan that I have, I guess. And also in terms of like being like in med school, like I have to like do a lot of planning and do a lot of like, organization, just because that's kind of what I'm forced to do.
Right.
It's like something that I've learned to do like by default. Like I'm always, thinking about, I'm always in the mode of, thinking about what I'm going to do for the next day. How am I going to like, schedule this and that so that I can accomplish X, Y, Z. Yeah. And so, and being very much of a planner, even without like, that driving force, I'm still like, even when I have like free time, like for this weekend, for example, it's a weekend where I actually don't have to like, do as much work because I'm kind of in a transition period right now, in the schooling, but it's like, I still find myself actively planning, okay, like this is my free time. What am I going to do to fulfill it? Like, make use out of it. What sorts of things am I going to, fit into my schedule? Like, it's just kind of something I do both at a subconscious level and at a conscious level when I'm supposed to do it, I guess.
Yeah.
Just organizing the different implications and ways I could, properly, aim for something.
Do you see your life as chapters? As right now you're in a specific chapter of your life and you know how the rest of it is going to play out, sort of thing? Like your book is already written in your mind?
In general, I do see that, my life is already, and this is also based on my beliefs too. Like I do believe that my life has already been planned out, like in general, like, but not just because I plan it out a certain way, but just yeah. Anyway, but yeah, I guess when I look back, I guess I've seen my life in chapters, but then when I look forward, it's more like, yeah, I guess you could call it chapters. Yeah. It's like I'll have certain things accomplished by certain moments of my life in the future. And then, yeah, kind of move on from there. Yeah. Yeah. Basically, yes.
Yeah. And what about in terms of trying to get at the core understanding of things? Like, do you feel like that's also a driving force behind your NI?
Yes. Although I do kind of associate that part more with the TI, like trying to understand. Well, I guess, okay, yeah. When it comes to understanding what things mean, the core understanding of like, the overall theme and the takeaway thing from the thing that I'm learning, yeah, that's from the NI. And then when it comes to understanding the why, the how, the logic behind all of it, the reasons for it, yeah, I guess that's more of the TI.
Right.
But yeah, definitely both play a role in getting at the core understanding.
And do you see them working together? Do you see them building something like this framework that you were talking about for the first half of the video?
Yeah, that framework and all that junk I've been putting on that website has definitely been an example of my, I guess, NITI working on something.
Right. So how do you see the two puzzling things out? How do you see TI working with NI together?
So first, I guess my NI has an idea for something that I want to have, that needs to be fulfilled, like something that gives purpose to something that's already existing, I guess, in the SE world. And then I get like my NI gets like
FE a little bit, the purpose, like a little bit of
well, I guess by purpose I mean, I guess like the why the idea should be put into place. Like what not so much what value is it gonna bring, although that is part of the picture. It's just just the why in general. Like why am I coming up with this idea? What purpose was it going to serve? I guess, yeah. Whether it's to bring value, sure, but it's also more than just that. It's going to serve a purpose in general, and that's what the NI gets at. Like what's like the idea that I have, and what purpose is it going to serve? And then the TI is, okay, how am I going to accomplish that idea? Why is it going to? What's the logic behind why it's going to serve the purpose that it claims to serve, and so forth.
Yeah, and so when you're trying to let those ideas play out, and actually enact them in your life, you go to the TI to sort of figure that out, or also the FE, or?
That's a good question. I think when I'm actually enacting the ideas that I have, yeah, I guess initially I'm using a very TI approach I'm enacting, putting it into action based on what my TI logically thinks is the right way, the logical way to have those ideas play out, how to properly do the SE, I guess, to make it physically work in the world. And also drawing into, the FE, okay, like, are people going to like this thing in the world? Like, is it going to be valuable to them, I guess? Although that's been something that I've had to, I guess, think about a bit more, because early on, when I initially got my OP type, I definitely agreed with it after, talking it out. Like, I spoke with Shan on the phone and everything, and did a lot more, reflection on it. But I felt like one of the things that I had to that I struggled with in the beginning, though, is I guess how FE plays a role into it, because when I'm thinking about the NI idea that I want to enact and the TI approach to, I guess, how it's going to work, I feel like the first thing, like when I'm in tribe mode, basically, when I'm thinking about how people are going to respond to this idea that I have, the first thing that I think about is, like, is this something that's going to be useful for them? Is this something that they're going to need? I mean, sure, I'll think about whether they'll like it or not. But like it's been less of a focus than, is this going to be useful? Like, the practicality that I'm trying to get at when I'm thinking about ideas, it's always been a focus and kind of another driving force for.
I also tends to overcomplicate things.
Yeah, and I've definitely done that like way too many times, just pathetically overcomplicating things too.
And it doesn't end up being useful when it's overcomplicated for some reason. Yeah.
And hence why I definitely agreed with the OP type that I ended up getting, and that kind of goes back to what I said about the framework that I'm trying to make. Like, the OP type is definitely an essential component of the holistic schema of personality, because it tells you how you pursue your desires, how you do things based on what the human needs are driving you to do. It's like, yeah, you may desire whatever it is that your MBTI core or your core type says you desire, but how you pursue those desires, it's going to be influenced by your needs, and needs are more of a stronger influencer than just what you generally want, what you're motivated by.
Just like from my default understanding, it sounds like so you have the NI, you should be narrowing down on this complicated stuff. It should become more and more simple. The more work you put into it, the more energy you put into organizing it. And like, that's basically what you're doing all day, is organizing it. No? It's not you're not broadening the topic. You're not making it more and more. No.
I mean, I feel like the only broadening thing that I'm trying to do is, like, I'm trying to create like a framework that's going to encompass all the possible types out there, and you can use NE to, I guess, think about all the possible like typology systems that could be incorporated into it. Sure. Yeah. But what I'm trying to do is make it so that it kind of unites all those possible typology systems and make them all serve this one singular purpose of understanding, personality. It's like, based on this framework, sure, you can choose whatever type system you want, socionics or Enneagram, whatever. It's all going to still be relevant it's all going to still play a role in this framework that unites all of it, so that all those typology systems can get at certain things about personality and accomplish this overarching understanding of personality, the purpose it's supposed to play.
Just for me, it feels like if you're uniting things together, it should simplify them and not make more and more types and more complications, right? So
Yeah,
is the end
exactly.
goal to make it actually even more simple in the end? Is there
Pretty
simplification? Yeah.
pretty much. And at the same time, like, because there's always going to be ways you can still come up with stuff and still come up with new perspectives to understand personality, and that's great. It's just the goal of the system is not really what are all the possible ways you can understand personality. It's like, okay, given that there are so many possible ways you can understand personality, what's a way to properly unite all of them, simplify them, so
Yeah.
that whatever possible ways you come up with, it can still be relevant and it can still play a role in this singular purpose, I guess.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay. So how do you see an SE demon? Do you see SE as your inferior? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Is it
That
painful?
part, I
Is it
guess.
something that you struggle with?
Yeah, especially early on. Like back when I was in college, I was definitely like, I guess, a less mentally healthy person than I was right now. Like, uh, and being in the like the context that I'm in right now, like the med school track is very rigorous, and the path to becoming, a doctor is, obviously very like, yeah, rigorous, and there's a lot expected of you in terms of, like how like work ethic and how much studying you're doing. You have to be very structured, very like you have to really hone in on the OIs to do well. And so yeah, early on in high school and college, when I was interested in working towards that track, um, I was very I was actually very like I guess OCPD about how I would go about my day. Like everything that I had to do had to like fit into this one like
Right.
singular purpose of if it's not relevant for the thing that I'm working
Right.
towards, if it's not med school relevant or if it's not medicine relevant, I'm just not gonna do it. And
Right. If it's
if
not
I'm
pushing
gonna
your dream forward, if it's not pushing your plan forward, then it's not
yeah
worth doing. Only
yeah
things that
and
push. Yeah.
like all the different activities, all the things I can do in the SE world. Yeah, if it's not going to help me work towards this goal of becoming a doctor, then I was like totally close to it, and it made me like I was very like in the mindset of like if anything ever threw off my plan, either for the grand scheme of med school or just for a for a specific part of the day, like if I had a certain thing structured, like if I structured that I was going to do X, Y, and Z at a certain time, and then something threw it off, like even if it was just by a few minutes or something, I would get so like I would lose it.
Yeah.
Just and if anything, it kind of sounded like I was very at the time very SI, because I was very like rigid in how I would plan like my day. I would literally like plan minute by hour by hour what I would be doing from what hours to what hours every single day of the week, and it would always be the
Mhm.
same. It would always be the same routine. I was very routine, same. When it came to my study habits and everything. So actually, in the beginning, when I was first getting into MBTI, I was actually trying to decide whether I was SI versus NI, because I was so just rigid and hyper focused on like the what in my plans, like the
Yeah.
scheduling and the yeah. But then I
SI
guess
is doing something different though. Yeah.
yeah, and there's more to SI than that. And also, the more I learned about the functions and how yeah, how to apply the function, it's more like yeah, whatever SI I might have been using back then, it was all for like an NI purpose. Like I realized the more I guess learned about myself, like in my natural default state, like I actually really hate being rigid in my planning. Like I don't like to um I don't like to focus on the concrete like details and the reality of how like to carry out a plan, like the organized structure. Yeah. So like, so anything SI that I would do would basically, I would only do it if I, if I knew that it was going to contribute to the, and I vision, like basically the routine that I would adopt back in college and high school for my study habits, it worked very well. Like if I did the same thing at a certain time of the day and at a certain amount of hours, it would give me results. It would give me the great results that I was always aiming to get. So because it was because the SI habits were kind of fulfilling my NI goals, I kind of got a bit addicted to just incorporating SI related stuff to like an SI approach to certain things. But yeah,
I mean,
it
that
was
could also be a little bit of SE
interesting.
playing into it, like where the SE is sort of carrying you forward, taking advantage of opportunities that might present themselves to help carry your plan forward a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's probably also true.
Do you see the SE as something you don't want to fail at, as something that you need to succeed in every time? Like trial and error is not something you want to start wasting your time with, sort of thing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm very much like, yeah. I'm low-key kind of averse to just, doing things where like it took me a while to be open to just doing things for trial and error without knowing, if it's actually in the future gonna, lead to the future desired outcome that we're trying to get. Like, but yeah, I don't know. Sorry, what was the question? Like, is it something that I don't want to fail at?
Yeah,
Like gathering facts, I guess.
Is failure something you're afraid of? Like you'll overplan in order to avoid the failure?
Oh, yeah. In general, yeah. Failure was definitely something that was the fear of failure, I guess, was a driving factor that played a huge role back then. Nowadays, it's like, well, I don't really fear failure. I mean, I don't want failure. I'm definitely averse to it, but I wouldn't say it's fear motivated anymore. I've also kind of learned to not how to not use fear as a motivating factor when it comes to getting myself to do what it is that I know I need to be doing. Like back then, it was actually, especially like during high school and college, I was actually purposefully instilling fear in myself. Like, if I didn't get this done, then this SE spontaneous thing is going to happen, and oh my gosh, that's going to throw off my NI plan. Like, basically, was my approach. Like, I would scare myself with the SE, my conception of like, what SE things can throw me off. I would scare myself with that, and then prompt myself to keep doing whatever it is that I was doing, work towards NI, and that was definitely not,
self-manipulation based on your fears.
Yeah, mental, emotional manipulation to scare myself into doing the thing that I need to do. Definitely not a good strategy. Even though I did get results that I wanted to get, there were definitely ways I could have gotten the same results, if not better, if I didn't use fear as a motivator. So it's definitely not something I would ever do to myself again. Definitely not something I would recommend to anyone. Never use fear as a motivator. I've definitely learned how to use.
Question: what do you do now instead of fear?
So a lot of what drives me now is more of a passionate sense of purpose, I guess, like passion over fear. And I don't know if passion's the best word to put it, because there's some, negative connotations that could be associated with passion. But basically it's more, I don't know, joy, ambition. I get like, huh?
A little bit of ambition, maybe?
In a positive sense, yeah. Because there can be negative connotations with ambition too, but it's more like, yeah, in a positive ambition, like healthy ambition. I guess joy is probably the closest word I can think of. Like, I'm more like, I'm doing this not because I'm scared of what will happen if I don't do it, but rather I'm doing this because I actually get joy out of doing this. I actually, have a sense of purpose for doing this. And yeah, a lot of that plays into, my faith and the ultimate basis for why I do the things that I do. It's all motivated by, joy and faith, and the things that, those are the things that have definitely not only given my life more meaning, but it's actually been more like also, I guess, effective in terms of, giving me the results that I'm supposed to be getting. I realized that when I motivate myself with, joy and faith and passion, I still do just as well, if not better, than how I would have done back then when I would use fear as a, unhealthy motivator.
Cool. So this is an interesting question. Do you feel at least that you suffer from being incoherent to others? And it's hard for you to have others understand your thoughts, even though you've got the blast up high?
Yeah. Especially since, sometimes I even confuse myself sometimes with how I'm trying to piece together all the, all the concepts and the rationality behind those concepts, and it will make sense to me. But then the more I get into the NITI, the deeper part of it, then I start to like overcomplicate it for myself, and then I confuse myself. And then when I try to talk it out with others, and especially when others are already confused with the things that are that make sense to me. If there are things that I confuse myself with, and obviously that's going to be worse when I try to communicate those things. But yeah.
Okay. And so how do you see your play last coming into play? Like, do you really feel like play is your demon? Does that make sense?
I guess relative to the other animals, it would probably be ranked low. Nowadays, I don't think I'm that bad at play, honestly. Okay, well, if you asked me that back then, like especially back in high school and my college mode, yeah, play last. There was basically no play in my life. Like I said, if any huh?
Yeah, what's the life pile of that? What does that look like?
Yeah, so back then, if any random thing, like I said, if any random thing threw off my schedule and I had to take a few minutes to do something that I was not expecting to do, even if it was just a few minutes, I would lose it. I would be cranky and just bitter for the rest of the day, and and then I would purposely use fear to motivate myself. I got to get back to what I'm doing. I got to get back to what I'm doing. Like forget this thing. Like hurry up with this thing that I got interrupted with. And also back then, I used to be really nitpicky about how I would communicate with others. I guess it's like this might sound kind of weird, but I would before I would start socializing with people, I would literally plan out conversations. I would play out the conversations in my head and plan out what I was going to say. Okay, if they said this, then I'll say this back. Literally, word for word, I would plan out things that I would say because I was just so averse, so blah, when it came to getting random things pinged at me from the tribe and playing back at them. I used to just be so averse to that.
So you would take like an hour to plan out a 5-minute conversation?
I mean, I wouldn't say an hour because, like I said, I was very time sensitive back then, and I needed to make sure I was every little moment of the day. I would be very nitpicky about making sure I was focused on this thing that I was working on for school or whatever. So I guess any simulations that I would run about planning for conversations, it would kind of happen, I guess, intermittently, like on the side. Like if I stopped working on something and looked around, I'll have something playing in my head or something, and then, or if I went to the bathroom, little nitpicky things like that. And yeah, that was back when I was very just rigid in how I would go about my day and my life and social life. But nowadays, oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Do you still feel like you're rigid in some ways? Is there still something to work on there?
I guess I still do struggle. In terms of rigidity, I do have a very tight schedule that I still kind of have to plan just because on my school expectations. But so yeah, I guess there is some rigidity in that, but it's not so much I kind of have to be that way with my schedule because of all the things that I have to do. But I guess naturally, if I have free time, and I'm not going to be so rigid about making sure I force certain things that I need to do that's work related in my free time. I guess I become more I don't know, but I still do struggle. I still do struggle if something does throw off my flow of the day, especially if I'm in work mode. And for example, if the power goes off and I'm trying to work on something, I would that would really bug me. I've done a lot, but I guess recuperating and recovering from that initial freak out, I've done better at, I guess, recuperating and not letting it carry on throughout the rest of the day, and just deal with it, learn to just a lot of the times I remind myself that even if I'm not able to accomplish the things that I plan to accomplish for the day, at the end, there's still a way I can still fulfill the overarching purpose that I'm serving in life. And that goes back to my, my personal beliefs. It's I can still fulfill this purpose that I'm, fulfilling, even if how I fulfill that purpose isn't what I plan to, isn't how I plan to fulfill. Part of why I want to become a doctor is tied to my faith. But, and part of how I'm going to become a doctor, I'm going to do, X, Y, and Z. But even if I can't get X, Y, and Z, I can still become a doctor. I can still do what it is that I'm purposed to do according to my faith. even if how I get there is not how I personally plan for it, I
Right.
guess. So that's
Yeah,
definitely given me like more peace to, I guess incorporate or be open to like, the SE and the chaos and deal with it better and not be so, yeah.
So like, so you were expressing a lot of how setbacks really drove you nuts at first, and now you're
Mhm.
more open to
Spontaneous
like,
setbacks, especially. Yeah. Like I
right,
was
the
never,
spontaneous.
like I was definitely averse to sporadic, like randomness, spontaneity. Like, yeah.
Mhm.
But
And now
now,
you're a little bit more free to what's it called, ad lib a little bit,
oh
with
yeah,
what's
for
going
sure.
on.
Yeah. If anything, like I kind of get, nowadays I kind of get a bit excited by, some like certain spontaneous things that happen. And then like, even if it means I have to readjust my schedule, like, hey, like I still actually feel excited to do this, even if I have to, adjust certain things that I planned out for.
Mhm.
Like nowadays it's just, oh, it's cool. If
Yeah.
anything, I actually welcome it now. Um,
And so you talk about your free time a little bit. Do you also have to plan your free time? Is that something?
um, yeah, I mean, it's something that I guess, kind of do by default, not because I feel obligated to. Especially nowadays when I'm in, I guess, a better state than I was back in college and high school. Because yeah, back in college and high school, I would still plan out my free time because I felt like I have to. Like I was using, fear and just obligation oriented mindset to, you know, do that sort of thing. Now it's more of like a, oh, yeah, I'll plan certain things during my free time, but not because I feel like I have to, not because, I'm scared of what will happen if I don't plan this thing in my free time. It's more like, oh yeah, I'll plan it because I actually want to. Like I actually want to fit this
Right.
into my schedule somehow. Yeah.
And so does that still kind of jerk you if there's a setback in your free times plan?
Not real. Not some.
No,
No. No.
not so much.
Yeah, I'm a lot more chill when it comes to things that uh set back my plans during my free times. And even if it's not during my free time, like I said, even if if I was to be working on something and the power went off or something, it would still kind of obviously be irritating. But like I guess I'm better at dealing with it and not letting myself get so caught up with
Yeah.
bitterness and yeah, when that happens.
What about in terms of if you want to get information from the tribe or you want to ask them questions, or how do you feel when people ask you questions? Or like right now, all I'm doing is trying to play with you and ask you questions. Yeah.
I guess, well, it depends on if it's questions related to the same overarching, like, I guess, concept or like theme that I'm very familiar with, like typology stuff. Like I can go
Okay.
on long, long rants about what I know about typology. So yeah, throw any question at me and I can find a way to connect it to my knowledge of
Right.
typology and ping back and forth. So yeah, that kind of thing. But it's something that's like kind of not of my interest or I don't know too much about. Yeah, I'll definitely have a harder time with that. Um,
But I mean, okay, so play isn't just me asking a question and then you going on a rant,
no,
right? That's not play at
oh, no,
all, right?
no,
So
no,
play
I'm
is
just,
like kind
yeah.
of like building something together, right?
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. So yeah, so in terms of that, I guess I think it's similar. If it's something that I'm familiar with, like personality typology or like medicine or something, and
Mhm.
I know how to come up with things on the spot. And yeah, it can still kind of work. Like if we're going to build something together that's related to the realm of the topic that I know about, like if we're working on, like if we're both talking about, you know, how to understand something about typology and we're both pinging back and forth and building on an idea together, basing it off of what we tell each other, what new information we throw at each other. Yeah, it's kind of similar.
Yeah. What about in terms of getting tribe feedback on your SF? Is that something you're asking the tribe how they see you? How does the tribe see you? Are you aware of that? Something you're trying to be aware of?
I mean, I guess it's something that, I'll kind of vaguely think, like I'll vaguely have crossed my mind. Yeah, I guess it's not really something I think about really, like how I'm
Mhm.
perceived by the tribe. I mean, okay, well, I guess it depends on who we're talking about in the tribe. Like,
So
if
the
I'm a,
tribe is the tribe, right? Not just
oh,
a certain
well,
individual. Yeah.
well, the thing is that's kind of hard because when it comes to, say, for example, when I'm interacting with like other doctors in the hospital, for example, and professionalism is an important thing that they critique you on and is part of like, a grade or something. Yeah, of course, I'll be aware of how I'm going to be perceived. I'm going to be aware of how I present myself to, patients and stuff. But when it comes to just, I guess, in general, how people see me, like in the grand scheme of things, not really.
What about your character? Like, are you building a character, a personality that you're sort of going to present to the tribe? Are you aware of how that character, how you as Michelle is perceived?
Yeah, I'm aware. I guess, yeah, I'll be aware of it definitely. Yeah, because, but I guess when I'm building character, when I'm working on or thinking about ways I can improve myself or um, how I'm going to like, what sorts of things I'm going to do that'll have an effect on the world. Um, I guess what drives me to, self improve and do those sorts of things is not so much, what are they going to think or what do they expect of me, but rather what do I personally, value? What's important to me and how am I going to best represent that so that I become the best person that, I become the healthiest version of myself that I understand as, healthy. And then of course, yeah, I mean, I'll consider what, I'll be aware of what, how the tribe might react and everything. And I'll take it into consideration if it's, something that's going to be off-putting. But I guess I wouldn't call it, but it's not like the driving force as to, yeah, when I'm actually in the mode of doing those sorts of things.
Yeah, like, but you do at least see how that can clash, where like just building yourself and your character based on how your own values can clash with how you're perceived. Like sometimes you kind of have to be a little bit fake to be perceived correctly. Do you get that sort of back and forth?
Like, do I run into moments where I feel like I have to be fake in order to be perceived a certain way?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, well, in general, I do feel like there are certain things that you like, yeah, that you kind of have to do. That isn't really like authentic in order to be perceived a certain way, but it's not really something I do, I guess, if that makes sense. So like, if I have a certain thing that I value and I'm going to act on it and the tribe doesn't like it, I mean, I'll adjust a bit, but it's not going to stop me from, I guess, doing the thing that I value if I have a good reason for, doing it. Because at the end of the day, it's like, I guess my values and my reasons for doing stuff, like it's not meant to, I guess, I mean, it's not meant to like have a, negative effect in the grand scheme of things. And if,
But it could, yeah.
but if of course it could, and hence why, of course I'll be open to, feedback and stuff. Like if the tribe says, hey, actually the thing that you're doing is actually really not what you think it is. Okay, yeah, I'll be open to that, of course. Like I'm not going to be a jerk and just me and whatever. It's just, I guess I'm more like, it's just like what I said, the driving force behind when I'm doing certain things is more based on, like what I do. And it's like, I'm not going to change like certain things that I value or my understanding of something if it's actually grounded in, something that I guess is.
Did you ever run into that thing where your TI has just this truth that can hurt somebody if you let it out? So you just sort of protect them from it?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, a couple of times. Yeah, I mean, I'm not really one to just speak the truth in someone's face just for the sake of the truth, especially if I know it's going to hurt them. Like, I tend to be very like I hate conflict, so I tend to do my best to avoid conflict and make sure it's when it comes to I guess speaking the truth and somebody needs to hear about it. Otherwise, like if it's the opposite, and if I don't speak the truth and it's gonna hurt them, on a but it's gonna like say the truth is gonna hurt them on an emotional level, but it's gonna save them on a logical level, I guess.
Right.
Then I would have to weigh the options. Like, okay, is their mental, emotional well-being more important than the logical, physical, or logical side of it? Yeah,
And then
that's
the other
wrong.
parameter that gets thrown into the mix is how will it hurt your reputation or how you're perceived as well if you say the truth? Like even if it does cause them good, it might cause you more bad in the long run by I don't know.
I guess that's true. I guess I don't really think about how it's going to hurt my the perception that others have on me. Yeah, when I'm weighing the options of like, should I say this, should I say that to, you know, hurt or help them? It's not, I don't know. I guess I'm not really in that mode. I'm more in tribe mode. I'm not really thinking about how it's going to affect me and my outside perception, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, at least not on a conscious level. That's not really what I'm thinking about, but yeah.
Really awesome. Okay, so I'm just going to share this one last comment before we sign off. And everybody, you can check out your website and your YouTube.
By the way, that yeah, the website is kind of still in the working progress. So, but like, yeah, people are free to look at it. It's just I might have some updates on certain things that I say on there. But for the most part, it's basically kind of it's basically like, yeah, what it says. Like, it's not likely that too many things will change, but there might be some tweaks here and there. How I word things or something.
Any patient would be lucky to have you as their doctor.
Oh, nice. Thank you. Yeah, that's nice to hear.
Okay, so just leave us maybe with a final thought on if you have any advice to someone maybe who's a little bit younger with your type or someone on their growth path.
Yeah, like advice to someone who is of my type that's younger than me, or anyone in general. Just
sure, someone of your type.
Okay, I guess. And I guess this kind of goes out to just any type in general, but, you know, focus on, and this is kind of what I like to emphasize on my website too. At the end of the day, like what's really most important is contentment, having contentment, discipline, and integrity. Because if any of those three things are missing, then it's going to throw imbalances. You're going to be at risk for imbalances, whether it's in your, you know, your needs according to your OP type, or imbalances in how you pursue desires. It's like, yes, because like at the end of the day, yeah, contentment, discipline, and integrity are important. So, yeah, focus on how you can achieve those three things, on how you can balance those three things. Because when you have those three things balanced and in, you know, good sync with each other, then everything else in your life will kind of have more balance. Like for example, if you're content but you don't have integrity, well, then you're going to be happy about the wrong things. If you have integrity but, you know, no contentment, yeah, you'll be doing the right things, but you won't be happy about it. What's the point of that? If you don't have discipline, you know, you're going to be pursuing contentment and integrity in all the wrong ways, which is not really integrity at the end of the day. But yeah, anyway, it's all that to say, yeah, find balance in those three things, and then like focus on, yeah, achieving those three things, like be happy, but also be, you know, disciplined, and also, you know what your values are, what's right and wrong, and be happy, contentment. Yeah. So once you find balance in those three things, then everything else in life can kind of help, I guess, balance it out, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Right. So have a good one, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and bye. Bye, YouTube. Thank you as well, Michelle, for being so honest and candid. It's really awesome.
Oh, yeah.